Welcome to Early Number Sense, highlights you can do at home. I'm Stephen Tucker, a lecturer at the University of Queensland's School of Education. So where do we begin with early number sense? We do know that it's an important foundation of mathematics to come. There are many components and far more than we can cover here. For many of us, working with early number sense seems intimidating. On the one hand, we feel we know this. It's just, counting, recognizing quantity? On the other hand, are we sure? There must be more to it than that. So how do we help? Well, some seemingly tiny things can make a huge impact, a real difference. Research shows that counting is often overemphasized, and other constructs connect better with more advanced mathematics skills. So what do? Key constructs of early number sense for this video are Subitising and composition. We're going to think a lot about relationships. And with these key ideas in mind, you can help build a great foundation of early number sense. Let's start with Subitising. Subitising is the immediate recognition of small quantities. Often, these appear in particular configurations. There are multiple types of Subitising, but for now, we're not concerned with the variations. When you see these, you often just know how many there are. You know that's 2, that's 3, that's 5. Ideally, you'd present these too quickly to count, but you don't always have to do that. We also get into composition, part-whole relationships. And if we want to move toward relational thinking, we need to think about how the parts and the whole can fit together and how they can be manipulated to make other parts and other wholes. Often we get to this by asking, how do you know and how do you see it? So for these, common responses for this 5 could be 3 and 2 or 4 and 1. You wouldn't necessarily use the actual colors that you see there, especially if you want children to come up with their own composition, but this is just to highlight what you could see. If a child counts first, at least reinforce how many there are in all to help connect that amount and that configuration with the name we gave the quantity. You can also encourage children to show it on their fingers. This embodiment of mathematics, especially this early number sense, can really help. Keep mixing in that quantity, that configuration, and even those hand gestures, as after a while, there should be less reliance on counting. We also want to look at these connections, as it is possible to highlight relationships and encourage certain links here. For example, sometimes we can use intentionally sequenced prompts. They don't have to be this way, but they can help with some of those highlights. So for example, if I start with this 2, I could progress to this 4. These configurations are common enough that we should see it as 2 and 4, but if you ask, how do you know? A child, if pressed, might say, oh, well that's 2 and 2, 2 stacked on top of each other, or 2 next to 2. Next, I could go to 6. Although this 6 is often seen as 3 and 3 next to each other, a child might see another 2 stacked onto the 4, especially if presented in this order. And you could keep going to 8 and other combinations like that. Usually, we would present 1 and ask how many, then take it away before presenting the next. But they can also help to see related configurations next to each other, and this would help with emphasizing some of those connections and relationships. So sometimes you might want to use intentional sequences that help build those connections, but also be ready for ones you might not have thought of. Allowing children to make their own interpretations and connections can enhance the learning experience, building that composition and Subitising. We can also attend to different configurations to highlight different ideas within Subitising and composition. So depending on that configuration, there might be different relationships highlighted. So this version of 6 might be seen slightly different than that version of 6. So I might see this as 2, 2, and 2, or 3 and 3, whereas the other configuration could be 1, 2, and 3, 3 and 3, or even 3 and 3 in a different way. And it can be very helpful to see multiple versions of the same quantity. You can also make connections among configurations. So 6 could be, well, all of these different ways of making 6, and there's even more. As children become better at Subitising and composing without counting, you can even use matching to help them make some of the connections between the different representations. And these are examples of what some call dot cards. You can find them online, or you can make your own. So when you see these, you might ask, which might you group together here, and why? And again, you don't need to use the colors. These were just for an example to help you sort through them when they're all on the screen together right now. 10 frames can also be helpful to highlight relationships within and around 5 and 10. It's a way to build on some of those relationships, using a little more structure. 10 frames are usually introduced after children have experience working with different configurations for Subitising that don't use a 10 frame. The 10 frame often helps build those pre-place value and place value concepts. So for here, again, we could highlight relationships around 5, 10, or even look at pairs. So for example, with this 8, you could ask, how many more to make 10, how many fewer than 10. This might also help children see pairs, so 2, 2, 2, and 2 next to each other, 4 groups of 2, or they might see 2 groups of 4 right on top of each other. They might see that they're missing a 2 to get to 10, or they're missing 1 from each 5 to get to 10. A small adjustment can change the way we think about structure. So here, it's still 8, but now we might think more about that relationship with 10, because now we have 10 and 2 less there, and more about the relationship with 5. We now have 5 and 3 more, a little more clearly, rather than looking at quite so much on the pairs. You can also extend this to 20 by adding another 10 frame. And again, 10 frames can also be in card form, like some of the dot cards, or you can use physical objects, so children can also create their own representations. This isn't just good for the younger children. You can easily extend this, building toward higher math skills such as arithmetic and algebra. Definitely challenge some of the relatively older children to do this too, and don't be afraid to start small and return to some of the lesser quantities. The greater quantities can even be challenging for adults, especially when the configurations are unfamiliar, if we haven't been trained yet to look for the patterns and configurations. I've seen plenty of times where young children do better than some of the parents if the young children are actually used to looking at patterns, so don't worry about it. Having that child's eye view can really help. This can help you build toward algebra. Whether or not you choose to use the symbolic forms for the younger children, you could consider doing that with some of the older children who are ready for it. So our 3, 3, and 3 to make 9, and we've got another version of 9 on the other side. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 equals 9. Well, so does 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. Well, and if 9 equals 9, then 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1. And you can start getting into some of the more advanced properties there as well if you'd like to. So that helps us see a little bit of an intro into early number sense. So just as a reminder, early number sense is a foundation for much of mathematics, especially arithmetic and algebra. There's a lot more there than just what we've seen here with Subitising and composition, but these are some of the important constructs that you can start with. Subitising and composition definitely need more attention. We've done plenty with counting, and that's not to say counting's a bad thing, but Subitising and composition really build that relational thinking and help move toward arithmetic and algebra and advanced math skills. As you're working on this, remember that reflection helps. That's not just for early number sense. Please ask why. Ask, how do you know? Encourage making connections. And also, attend to configuration and composition to help build those relationships. When you're ready to think more directly about those math concepts, get right in there and ask those questions. And remember, fingers are good. Include showing it on your fingers alongside saying the word. That embodiment really does help. What you do at home can make a huge difference without being complicated. You don't need to make hours worth of things to do or go into incredibly high level math to be able to make a big difference for your child. Early number sense can be accessible for you and your children. If you'd like some more resources, I've prepared some examples here for you. Some tips, for example, of things you can use at home. Just search online for dot cards. There are plenty. You can also make your own. Be sure you think critically about the pre-made resources you find, though. Some of them are great, some of them maybe less so. If you've tried some of this for a while and you happen to have an iPad, you might want to look at Fingu. It's a free early number sense app developed by researchers. I use it a lot in my own research as well, although I didn't have a hand in actually designing it. You may want to try it after you've worked without it. It can be a great app, especially involving some of that embodiment and some great key ideas, but of course it isn't perfect. A lot of it has to do with how it's used. I've shared with you here some readings for broad audiences. So these are sort of intended for teachers, and they're easily accessible for parents as well to understand. And of course, if you want to dig in a little deeper into the research behind some of this, I've posted some examples here, including some of my own publications as well, and there are more on the web. So thank you for engaging with this material. I hope it's been helpful. Please remember that, of course, if you would like to learn more, whether it's some advice, professional development, interested in research partnerships if you're a teacher, or you'd like to pursue PhD studies, any of those sorts of things and more, by all means, feel free to reach out because I'd love to hear from you.